Hi, I'm Steve Gedeon, a professor at one of the largest entrepreneurship programs in the world at the Ted Rogers School of Management at Ryerson University in Toronto, Canada. But today, I'm back in Italy, coming from the Pinacoteca Bologna, an art museum from the heart of the Renaissance, after humanity finally emerged from the Dark Ages and rediscovered great art. The ancient Romans had two different types of sculptures that they would sell. One sculpture was imperfect. Maybe the nose would be broken off or it would be missing an arm, and they would use wax to fix the imperfection. They would use wax to either glue something back together again, or maybe they'd add some dirt to make it the color of the marble or the whatever the stone was of the sculpture, and maybe reform the nose or something like that. The second kind of sculpture was a perfect sculpture. It was sold sine cera, without wax. This became the root of the word sincere, meaning that you're authentic, that you're pure, there's nothing wrong with you. So a sine cera sculpture is an example here. This is Apollo and Daphne from the Kunsthistorisches Museum in Vienna, Austria. Now, this is a really beautiful story where Apollo is trying to woo the maiden Daphne, and Daphne prays to the goddess to save her from Apollo, and the goddess turns her into a tree. And this is an example of the moment when Daphne is being transformed into a tree. Now you can imagine this sculpture wouldn't look the same if it was broken, if it needed wax to hold everything together. It certainly wouldn't have stood up through the ages to be this amazing work of art that we see here. So being sine cera, or sincere, or living without wax, is important. It means to be living in harmony with yourself, to ensure non-contradictions, that there's harmony between what you do, what you say, what you think, and how you feel. That the expression, to thine own self be true, your goals should conform to reality, that your goals should conform to your interests or your skills or your resources. So to be authentic, to live in harmony, means that your goals should conform to who you are, your interests, your skills, or your resources, but also that your words conform to reality, that you're honest with yourself and with other people, but also you have integrity, that your actions conform to your words. You don't say one thing and do another, that you make and keep commitments. When you say you'll do something, you actually do it. You have integrity. And that your character or your actions over time are good. They're in accordance with your beliefs. So this gets us to principle number 8, the integrity of character. It's basically the principle of being principled. Now, in the last episode, we talked about tracking your happiness and discovering sources of unhappiness and contradictions in your life. I talked about 3 different sources of contradictions. The first was your day-to-day ups and downs, or your reaction to events, that things outside of your control make you unhappy. And we talked about the benefits of self-talk in order to get over this particular contradiction. So let me give you 2 examples from my personal life. The first example was, I used to be a bit of a hothead, that if somebody cut me off in a car, I might scream out the window. But that wasn't who I wanted to be, that I needed to find a way to, I talked about this little microscopic second in time between the reaction and the event. And so how do you change your kind of natural reaction to things? Through positive self-talk, and to say that's not who I want to be. I want to carefully choose my words and thoughts. I don't want to be that crazy hothead in the road that yells out the window at other people. And over time, I was able to rewrite my negative beliefs so that I wouldn't lash out at people when things went wrong. A second example might be even more important and more relevant, is that one day I was walking down the hallway at Ryerson University, and a student walked up to me and said, "Oh, Professor Gedeon, I wanted to thank you. You changed my life. A couple of years ago, I walked into you in the hallway and I asked you this and you said this, and then I asked you something else and you said this, and I want you to know how much that changed my life. Thank you so very much." And they shook my hand and walked away. And I thought, I have no idea who that person was. I don't remember the event at all. But I then thought, well, thank goodness I was on. That when that student needed me, I gave them the time and the attention and the ability to say something meaningful in their life that put them on a better trajectory. That a lot of education happens outside of the classroom when we least expect it. And I realized that I needed a new self-talk, that I needed to find a way to remind myself to pay attention to people when they talk to me so that I could have these transformative events with other people. And so I formed a new self-talk statement that said something on the order of, when other people talk to me, I turn off the noise in my life and completely focus on them. It's a really powerful way to let people know you care about them. That when they're talking to you, you listen, you pay attention, you turn off the noise in your head. You don't look at your computer screen, you don't open your mail, you don't answer the phone when it rings. When someone's talking to you, you listen, you pay attention, you turn on your system too and devote complete attention to them. I also came up with a second self-talk statement to help me be able to have these kinds of events in the future as well. And this was that whether I choose to be or not, I am a role model for good or bad. That students notice the behaviors of their professors, and if they're good behaviors, they model those behaviors. If they're bad behaviors, they also model those behaviors. So whether I choose to be a role model or not, I am one. My self-talk statement is, be a good role model. So that was the first example of day-to-day events outside of our controls and how to control our reaction to those things. The second one is how to control our day-to-day habits that are within our control. And I'd like to talk in particular about this great book called The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg. He talks about not just programming your self-talk, but how to program your actual actions themselves through your habits. And he talks about the importance of identifying the routine. And he talks about that there's this cue, routine, reward system that people fall into. That a cue happens, it enacts some kind of habit, and then there's often some kind of a reward that comes with that. It's a really well-written book with lots of examples from advertising and laboratory tests on rats and dogs and things like that. And he shows you how to reprogram your habits by first identifying the routine, either the routine that you're trying to stop or a new routine that you're trying to inculcate, experimenting with rewards, and then isolating the cue that triggers those habits and rewards. And finally, to have a plan. So I'll give you an example of something from my life. I'd noticed that for many years I would have a goal to drink more water. And I thought, well, in particular, I should drink water when I first get up in the morning because I tend to get up in the morning, have a cup of coffee. But coffee is a diuretic, and it reduces your amount of water rather than increasing your amount of water. And I thought, if I can find a way to drink water maybe before my cup of coffee in the morning, that might get me on a good start. So I first identified the cue of me making coffee in the morning. The routine that I wanted to trigger was to drink a glass of water. And the reward would be, or that I created, was I could drink my coffee. So I tried to create a new habit around, as I'm making my coffee in the morning, and I'd have to put a little post-it note on the coffee machine, but as I'm making coffee in the morning, drink a glass of water, and when I'm done with my glass of water, I can drink my coffee as my reward. That worked pretty well, but I realized I really didn't like drinking that much water first thing in the morning, and so I changed it a little bit. That now, as I'm brewing my first cup of coffee in the morning, I trigger the habit to drink half a glass of water. And then as I drink that first cup of coffee, I don't let myself drink the second cup of coffee until I've finished my glass of water. And that's a habit that's worked pretty well for me. So the third major topic is identifying sources of long-term unhappiness. To identify long-term contradictions in your life that are deeply seated sources of unhappiness. Now, I've identified 5 specific kinds of sources of long-term unhappiness that I've seen either in myself or in my students or in my friends. So the first one that tends to come up a lot is duty to family. That students will often say, I want to move to the US, or I want to get a great job, or I want to marry the person of my dreams, but I've got this duty, I've got this burden to my family that I have to be the man of the family, and I have to earn an income to pay for my siblings and things like that. And very often we have this belief that I have a duty to other people, but you didn't even talk to your mom and ask, Mom, what do you think about me moving to the U.S.? Do I need to stay here and make money to take care of you? Or would you rather that I go forth and flourish and maybe come back later on after I've had children or something like that? You should at least have an honest conversation with your family about whether they think that you have a duty to them, even if you think in your head that you have a duty to them. So that's the first one, that we have this duty to our family, and that causes sources of long-term unhappiness. But this also is indicative of the second source of unhappiness, which is this duty to other people. That a lot of people have this deep-seated feeling of guilt or duty that their job is to make other people happy. And this is the philosophy of altruism as opposed to self-interest. Now, altruism doesn't mean to be nice to other people. Altruism actually means to put other people above yourself. Other people's happiness is important. Your own happiness is not important. And people feel guilty. How can I be happy when there's suffering in the world? That they have in their mind the role model of Mother Teresa. In fact, the most common role model that women claim to have in their lives is Mother Teresa. But they don't act like Mother Teresa, and this is a source of unhappiness. They consciously say, I should be like Mother Teresa, but subconsciously they say, I don't want to be like Mother Teresa. I want to be happy. And so this sets up a contradiction in their lives. That how can I be happy when other people are suffering? Very often this comes from religious beliefs that in my own case, I was raised a Catholic, and I was taught you're born with original sin. If you don't follow the rules, if you don't act like Mother Teresa, you're going to go to hell. You're never going to go to heaven unless you do what we tell you to do. That you have to follow these authoritarian duties in order to get the reward at the end of your life. That other people are important, or the state is important, or duty to your country is important, or duty to your family is important, or duty to society or the earth is important. Your own happiness is not important. Now this is in contradiction with self-interest, which says that I have a rational interest in my own happiness. Now, this isn't a narcissistic, crazy form of selfishness where you hurt other people to benefit yourself, but that you live in harmony with other people and with yourself, but you have a rational interest in your own happiness, in your own self-interest, rather than this duty to put other people above yourself. The fourth major source of unhappiness that I've identified is this belief in determinism. I talked about that last week in this external locus of control versus internal locus of control. That people feel I'm a victim or I'm powerless, that it's fate or destiny or the man or society or the people in power or conspiracy theories or the stars, but something else has control. What's the point? I'm not even going to try to fulfill my goals. I'm not even going to try to be happy because what's the point? And that's a really pernicious, deep-seated feeling that a lot of people have, that what's the point of even trying? The fourth one I've identified is this idea that money is the root of all evil, that people have a rational self-interest in wanting to make money. Or a lot of my business students feel that I want to start up a business and make a lot of money and have financial security and all that brings, but they have this feeling inside that, well, geez, capitalism's bad, money's the root of all evil. I shouldn't be doing that. I should be doing something else for other people rather than doing something that earns money and gives me safety and security and happiness. But what they don't realize is that if you make a product, no one is forced to buy your product. They only buy your product if it makes them better. That there's this trade of value for value, that if you start a business and you earn a legitimate living through making products that other people voluntarily give you their money in exchange for, they wouldn't have given you their money if it didn't make them better. They wouldn't give you their money if it didn't make them happy. They wouldn't give you their money if they didn't think that this was a good transaction. So, in contrast to thinking the money is the source of all evil, money is actually an important aspect for figuring out, am I doing something that is valuable? Is what I'm doing more valuable to other people than the money that they hold? So Money is not the source of all evil. Money is the source of encouragement to do things that are valuable and important. Finally, I want to talk about this idea of the mind-body dichotomy, or the moral-practical dichotomy, that morality is something that is bad for you. Morality is a set of rules that you don't really want to do, but you have to do, or you won't get to go to heaven, or you won't be good, or society will give you negative approbation and things like that. That morality is kind of bad for me. I don't want to do it. I have to be forced to comply with reality, and that the thing that's moral, like earning money, is bad. So if I got this moral-practical dichotomy, I have to make money in order to survive. That's practical, but morally, money is bad. And so this moral-practical dichotomy that arises out of the theory of altruism and a lot of religious beliefs really set you up for long-term sources of unhappiness. So as you're going through and tracking your happiness and tracking sources of contradiction, beware of whether any of these sources of contradiction are impacting your life and your happiness. So here's our assignments from this particular week. Continue to journal and monitor your happiness and identify sources of contradictions that cause unhappiness, but then to go back and iterate and review your previous self-talk statements, your previous beliefs, and your previous values, and find out whether or not they're still in harmony with where you want to go now that you're going back and reiterating. And this is really a lifelong journey, that where you are on Maslow's hierarchy of values will change as you go through your life, and that as you climb Maslow's hierarchy of values, your design challenges will change. So as this figure here shows, that when you're young, you have to really worry more about good health and earning money and achieving financial security and maybe some property and enough money to be able to retire and kind of sort of meet those basic physiological and safety and security needs. But as you go higher and higher up your Maslow's hierarchy of values, you start to seek love and belonging, self-esteem, respect, and finally, self-actualization. So as you get older and as you achieve your lower levels and go higher up Maslow's hierarchy of values, your design challenges will naturally change. So today we learned the 8th entrepreneurial principle, the principle of being principled, or also called integrity, or the integrity of character, to live without wax and ensure non-contradictions. I talked about 3 different sources of unhappiness that we talked about last week, and identified 5 specific sources of unhappiness that a lot of people discover as they climb Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Well, there's a lot to talk about, a lot more to cover. I've got a series of tools, a series of assignments, and there's lots more and good books to read, but I think that's enough for today. Remember, entrepreneurship is like learning how to play the guitar. Crank it up to 11. How much happiness do you want in your life? Just a little bit, or do you want to turn your happiness up to 11? Have a great life. Remember, life is about more than just living. A career is about more than just a job. Turn everything in your life up to 11. Have a wonderful life.